The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metallic ocean, filled with delegates from 100 different worlds. Floating platforms held representatives from species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Their technology gleamed under the artificial lights, and their voices carried the weight of ancient civilizations. Ambassador Kethver of the Zalani people stood at the center speaking platform. His tall, thin frame shook as he raised his 4 arms toward the assembled delegates. His skin, normally a proud silver color, had turned pale gray with exhaustion and fear. Behind him, massive screens showed images that made even the most hardened diplomats look away in horror. "Please," Kethver's voice cracked as he spoke into the translation device. "My people are dying. Our children are being consumed. Our cities burn while you debate procedures and protocols." The screen showed the nightmare that had become his homeworld. The Sara Prime, once a beautiful planet of crystal cities and floating gardens, now looked like a vision of hell. Dark, writhing shapes moved across the surface like living oil. They were the Void Swarm, and they devoured everything in their path. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the human observation section, watching the proceedings with growing disgust. He was a career military man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes from years of service. His uniform bore the simple blue and white colors of the Human Defense Force. Beside him, other human delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Look at them," whispered Dr. Lisa Park, the team's chief scientist. She was a small woman with quick, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "They're already making excuses before he even finishes speaking." Jake nodded grimly. He had seen this before, in smaller conflicts. The big powers would find reasons to avoid getting involved, especially when the costs were high and the benefits unclear. On the screens, the horror continued. The Void Swarm moved like a living thing, but it was made of ships and creatures that defied easy description. They seemed part machine, part organic tissue, part something else entirely. When they touched anything living, that life was absorbed into the mass, making the swarm stronger and larger. "We estimate that over 2 billion Zalani have already been consumed," Kethver continued, his voice breaking. "Our defense fleets lasted less than 6 hours against their advance. Our strongest shields were penetrated in minutes. We have never seen anything like this enemy." The first to respond was Chancellor Vexkari of the Hegemony, a massive reptilian species that controlled 1/3 of known space. His voice boomed through the translation system with cold authority. "The Hegemony sympathizes with the Zalani situation," he said, though his tone suggested no sympathy at all. "However, our military analysts have reviewed the threat assessment. The cost of intervention would be enormous, and the chance of success is minimal. We cannot risk our own people for what appears to be a lost cause." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Jake felt his hands clench into fists. The Altarian delegate, a floating creature of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell, spoke next. "The Altarian Trade Federation has suffered recent losses in the Outer Rim conflicts. Our resources are stretched too thin to commit to another military action. Perhaps diplomatic contact with this swarm could resolve the situation peacefully." Dr. Park made a disgusted sound. "Diplomatic contact? They're eating people alive." The Vegan Empire's representative, a tall being with multiple heads, nodded in agreement with the Altarians. "The Empire's position is one of careful neutrality. We cannot set a precedent of military intervention in every regional conflict. The galactic balance must be maintained." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy found their excuses. The Arxian peacekeeping force, supposedly the moral conscience of civilized space, claimed they needed more evidence that this threat extends beyond Zalani space. The Silicon Collective cited computational resource allocation priorities. The Stellar Confederacy mentioned prior military commitments. Kethver listened to each refusal with growing desperation. His silver skin had now turned almost white, and his forearms trembled as he gripped the speaking platform. "You don't understand," he pleaded. "This is not just about my people. The swarm grows stronger with every world it consumes. It learns from what it absorbs. Soon it will be strong, enough to threaten all of you. Chancellor Vexcarius' laugh was like grinding metal. Ambassador, your species has been in space for less than 500 years. Do not presume to lecture civilizations that have endured for millennia about galactic threats. The hegemony has faced extinction-level events before and survived. We know how to evaluate true dangers. Dr. Park was studying the data streams from the Sara Prime on her portable device. Her face grew paler with each screen of information she reviewed. Jake, she whispered urgently, look at this adaptation rate. The swarm isn't just consuming. The Zilani, it's incorporating their technology, their biology, even their memories. Each victory makes it exponentially more dangerous. Jake leaned over to look at her analysis. The numbers were terrifying. The swarm had started as perhaps 1 million individual units 3 weeks ago. Now it numbered in the hundreds of millions, and each unit was more advanced than the last. How long before it starts spreading to other systems? He asked quietly. At current growth rates, maybe 6 weeks. Maybe less if it finds a particularly rich world to consume. On the main platform, the final vote was being called. One by one, the great civilizations of the galaxy voted against intervention. The count was overwhelming, 47 against, 3 abstentions, 0 in favor. Kethver collapsed to his knees as the final tally was announced. His people's last hope had been crushed by bureaucracy and cowardice. The screens behind him showed the final defense stations around the Sara Prime going dark one by one. The matter is closed, Chancellor Vexcari announced with satisfaction. This incident will be classified as a regional conflict outside Council jurisdiction. The Zilani delegation is advised to seek alternative solutions. The session was adjourned and delegates began filing out of the chamber. Many avoided looking at the broken Zilani ambassador or the horrific images still playing on the screens. Jake Morrison stood up slowly, his jaw set in a hard line. Beside him, Dr. Park was already connecting to Earth's communication network. You thinking what I think you're thinking? She asked. I'm thinking about a conversation I had with Admiral Cole last month, Jake replied. About what humanity would do if we ever faced a situation where the galaxy abandoned innocent people to genocide. Dr. Park nodded. Protocol 7. Protocol 7, Jake confirmed. Within the hour, a coded message was transmitted across space to Earth's military command. Admiral Ben Cole, a stern man with iron-gray hair and 40 years of military service. Read the report in his office overlooking the Pacific Ocean. He studied the tactical data, the casualty estimates, and the galaxy. Council's shameful refusal to act. Cole had fought in humanity's early wars among the stars. He remembered when Earth had been alone, when other species had dismissed humans as primitive upstarts barely worth noticing. He remembered the sacrifices made to earn humanity's place in galactic civilization, now that same civilization was turning its back on a helpless species facing extinction. Cole activated his emergency command console and began issuing orders. Within hours, every ship in the human defense fleet received the same message: prepare for immediate deployment to Zilani space. The orders were classified under Protocol 7, unauthorized humanitarian intervention. Humanity was going to war, alone if necessary. They would not let genocide happen on their watch, regardless of what the galaxy's great powers decided. Sometimes, Cole thought as he watched the first ships prepare for launch, the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. The galaxy had turned away from the Zilani's desperate plea for help. But humanity remembered what it felt like to stand alone against impossible odds. They would not let another species face that darkness without hope. The space around the Sara Prime looked like a nightmare made real. Where once there had been empty void between planets, now a massive web of living darkness stretched across the entire system. The void swarm had built a network of biomechanical ships that pulsed with an evil light, slowly draining the life from the planet below. Captain Alex Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Washington, watching the horror through the main view screen. He was a veteran of 12 major battles, but nothing had prepared him for this sight. The enemy ships moved like living creatures, constantly shifting and changing shape as they fed on the dying world. "Sir, we're detecting over 3 million individual swarm units," reported Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan from her position at the tactical station. She was young for her rank, but her skills as a fighter pilot had earned her rapid promotion. "They're arranged in a defensive sphere around the planet, no gaps in their coverage." Alex nodded grimly. The 3 human battle groups had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system an hour ago. What they found was worse than their worst fears. The swarm had not just attacked the Sara Primae, they had turned the entire star system into a feeding ground. "Communications, any word from the surface?" Alex asked. "Weak signals from the capital city, sir," came the reply. "The Zilani defenders are still fighting in isolated pockets, but they're being overwhelmed. We're picking up continuous distress calls. On the planet's surface, the city of Nauthara burned. Once a beautiful metropolis of crystal towers and floating gardens, it now looked like a war zone." Major Chris Lee crouched behind the wreckage of a Zilani transport vehicle, checking his weapons charge level. Around him, his Marines prepared for what everyone knew would be a desperate fight. "Okay, people, listen up," Chris called to his squad. "We're not here to win a war. We're here to buy time for the evacuation ships to get these people out. Every minute we hold this position means more lives saved." Sergeant Nina Brown, a tough woman with 10 years of combat experience, nodded to her team. "You heard the Major. We dig in here and make them pay for every inch." Beside her, Corporal Ryan Clark checked his ammunition supply. He was barely 22 years old, but his steady hands and calm demeanor had made him invaluable in close combat. "How many civilians are we talking about, sir?" "Intelligence estimates around 50,000 still alive in this sector," Chris replied. "The evacuation ships can take maybe half that number in the first run." The sound of approaching swarm units echoed through the ruined streets. They moved with a horrible scraping noise, like metal claws on stone. When the first creatures appeared around the corner, even the experienced Marines felt their blood freeze. The swarm units were a nightmare fusion of machine and organic matter. They had once been Zilani defenders, but the swarm had absorbed them and twisted them into something else. Their bodies were partly metal, partly flesh, and partly something that hurt to look at directly. They moved with inhuman speed and coordination. "Open fire!" Chris shouted. The battle erupted in the streets of Nauthara. Human pulse rifles sent streams of energy into the advancing horde, while the swarm responded with weapons that seemed to change and adapt with each shot. The Marines fought with practiced efficiency, but they were vastly outnumbered. Above the planet, the space battle had begun. Kate Sullivan led her fighter squadron in a desperate assault against the swarm's outer defenses. Her pilots included Tony Mitchell, barely out of flight school but fearless in combat, and Maria Santos, a veteran ace with 37 confirmed kills. "Red Squadron, stay tight," Kate ordered through the comm system. "These things adapt to our attack patterns, so keep changing your approach vectors." The swarm ships were unlike anything the human pilots had ever faced. They seemed to heal damage almost as quickly as it was inflicted, and their weapons grew more accurate with each exchange. Worse, they appeared to learn from each encounter, becoming more effective against specific human tactics. Tony Mitchell's fighter screamed through space as he dodged a stream of energy that seemed to bend and curve to follow him. "They're predicting our moves," he reported. "It's like they can see into our heads." "Negative," Maria Santos replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "They're analyzing our flight patterns. Keep it random, people. No standard maneuvers." In the engineering section of the Washington, Paul Wright worked frantically with his technical team to understand how the swarm operated. Paul was a brilliant engineer who had designed many of humanity's most advanced weapon systems. Now he faced technology that seemed to break every rule he understood. "The energy signatures don't make sense," he muttered, studying the data streams from the battle. "It's like they're using quantum mechanics in ways that shouldn't be possible." Dr. Thalmanos, a Zilani scientist who had been rescued from the planet's surface, worked alongside the human team. His tall, thin frame was bent with exhaustion and grief, but his mind remained sharp. The swarm does not just consume flesh and metal, he explained. It absorbs knowledge, memory, even consciousness itself. Each being it takes makes it smarter. Paul felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying this thing gets more intelligent with every person it kills? Exactly. And it has consumed billions of my people. Their combined knowledge is now part of the swarm's collective mind. The battle raged for hours. Human ships took terrible damage, but they refused to retreat. The crew of the Washington worked with desperate efficiency as enemy fire tore through their armor. In the medical bay, Dr. Carol Green treated wounded Marines as fast as they could be brought in from the surface. We're losing people fast, she reported to the bridge. The swarm weapons seem designed to cause maximum suffering. It's like they want their victims to suffer before they die. Captain Rodriguez listened to the reports with growing concern. His ship was taking heavy damage, and the enemy seemed to be adapting to every tactic they tried. But the evacuation? Ships were still loading refugees from the planet's surface, and every minute they held out meant more lives saved. Sir, we've got a problem, Kate Sullivan reported from the Fighter Control Center. The swarm is moving additional units to intercept the evacuation convoy. They're trying to cut off our escape route. Alex made a decision that would become legendary in human military history. All ships, this is Rodriguez. I'm taking the Washington on a direct assault course toward the swarm capital ship. All other vessels protect the evacuation convoy at all costs. The bridge crew stared at him in shock. Lieutenant Commander Jane Foster, his first officer, spoke up. Sir, that's a suicide run. The Washington can't survive a direct assault against that thing. Maybe not, Alex replied calmly. But it'll buy the refugees time to escape. And sometimes that's all we can do. The Washington turned toward the massive swarm vessel at the center of the enemy formation. It was a horrific thing, part ship and part living creature, easily 10 times the size of the human dreadnought. Its surface writhed with organic components that pulsed with alien life. As the Washington charged toward certain destruction, its crew worked with quiet determination. They knew they were going to die, but they also knew their sacrifice would save thousands of innocent lives. All weapons. Continuous fire, Alex ordered. Engineering, everything you've got to the engines. We're going to ram that thing. The final moments of the Washington were broadcast across the human fleet. As the ship struck the swarm capital vessel, Captain Rodriguez's last transmission echoed through space. Tell Earth we held the line. Tell them we did not fail, the explosion that followed lit up the entire system. The swarm capital ship was destroyed, and the shock wave disrupted their formations long enough for the evacuation ships to escape with over 2 million Zelani civilians. The battle was won. But the cost was terrible. Humanity had lost an entire dreadnought and thousands of brave soldiers. Yet, as the evacuation convoy jumped to hyperspace, carrying the survivors to safety, every human in the fleet knew they had done the right thing. The galaxy might have turned away from the Zelani's desperate plea for help, but humanity had answered with fire and steel. They had proven that sometimes the smallest voice can make the biggest difference when it speaks for justice and courage. News of humanity's unauthorized attack on the Void Swarm spread through the galaxy like wildfire. In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, emergency sessions were called as angry delegates demanded answers. How dare a minor species like humanity act without permission? How dare they ignore the Council's decision and launch military action on their own? Chancellor Vexcari of the Hegemony stood before the assembled delegates, his massive reptilian form radiating fury. His voice boomed through the translation system as he spoke to the emergency session. This is intolerable, he declared. The humans have violated every treaty, every protocol, every law that holds our civilization together. They have acted like savage primitives, launching attacks without authorization. This cannot stand. Ambassador Helen Carter sat in the defendant's chair, surrounded by hostile alien faces. She was a career diplomat with 20 years of experience, but she had never faced charges like these. The formal accusations read like a list of the galaxy's worst crimes: unauthorized military action, violation of galactic law, disruption of established diplomatic protocols, and interference in classified regional conflicts. Ambassador Carter, the Chief Justice, a floating crystalline being called Zathara, spoke with cold authority. How do you answer these charges? Do you deny that humanity launched military action without council approval? Helen looked around the chamber at the faces of species that had turned their backs on genocide. She felt no shame, only disgust at their hypocrisy. I do not deny it, Your Honor. Humanity acted to save innocent lives when this council refused to do so. A wave of angry murmurs swept through the chamber. The Altarian delegate, still contained in his energy shell, spoke up. The human shows no remorse for her species' criminal actions. The Altarian Trade Federation demands maximum sanctions. Cut off all trade with Earth immediately. The Vegan Empire's multi-headed representative nodded in agreement. The Empire seconds this motion. Humanity must be expelled from the Council and isolated until they learn proper respect for galactic law. While the Council debated humanity's punishment, the real war continued in Zalani space. General Steve Adams commanded the defense from his flagship, the Liberty Bell. As human forces tried to hold back the advancing swarm, Steve was a practical man who had risen through the ranks by winning battles others said were impossible. Now he faced his greatest challenge yet. Sir, we've lost contact with the Harmony Station, reported his communications officer. The swarm overran the defenses 3 hours ago. Steve studied the tactical display with growing concern. The quantum virus that Dr. Park had developed was working, but not fast enough. The swarm was adapting to their electronic warfare faster than expected. For every ship they disabled, 2 more seemed to take its place. What's our current evacuation status? He asked. Colonel Foster reports successful evacuation of 8 Zalani worlds, sir. But we're running out of transport ships. The civilian vessels are working around the clock, but there are just too many refugees. At the Kepler Refugee Station, Colonel Amy Foster coordinated the largest evacuation operation in human history. The station, originally built to house 50,000 people, now held over 2 million Zalani refugees. The conditions were terrible, but it was better than the alternative. Amy was a logistics expert who had managed supply lines during humanity's expansion into deep space. Now she faced the impossible task of feeding, housing, and caring for an entire displaced civilization. Her team worked 18-hour shifts, supported by volunteers from every human colony. We need more medical supplies, reported Dr. Carol Green, who had been transferred from the Washington's medical bay before the ship's final battle. The Zalani children are suffering from malnutrition. Their biology is different from ours, and our standard rations aren't enough. Danny White, a civilian cargo pilot who had volunteered his ship for the evacuation, wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished unloading another transport. I've got 47 ships lined up for the next run, he reported. But we're hearing rumors that the Altarians are threatening to impound any human vessel that enters their space. Amy felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. Every decision she made affected millions of lives. Keep the ships running, she ordered. We'll deal with the political problems later. Back on Earth, the political consequences were becoming clear. President Linda Hayes stood in the Oval Office, reading reports of trade sanctions and diplomatic isolation. The galaxy's major powers were united in their fury at humanity's actions. Madam President, her chief of staff briefed. The Altarian Trade Federation has cut all commercial ties. The Vegan Empire is threatening to blockade our shipping lanes. Even some of our former allies are distancing themselves from us. Linda had been a senator before becoming president, and she understood the cost of standing alone. But she also understood the cost of doing nothing while innocent people died. What about our economy? It's going to hurt badly, ma'am. We import 60% of our advanced technology from galactic sources. Our colonies depend on alien trade for basic Supplies. If this continues, we're looking at massive unemployment and potential starvation in the outer systems. Despite the mounting pressure, Linda's response was swift and decisive. She called a press conference that would be broadcast across the galaxy. Standing before the cameras, she delivered a message that would define humanity's place in galactic history. To the people of Earth and to the galaxy beyond, she began, her voice steady and strong. We face a choice today. We can submit to the demands of those who would punish us for saving lives, or we can stand firm in our principles. Humanity chooses to stand firm. The broadcast reached every human colony and was intercepted by alien monitoring stations across the galaxy. Linda's words resonated with a power that surprised even her enemies. Yes, we violated your laws, she continued. We acted without permission. We defied your council's decision. And we would do it again. Because there are times when doing the right thing matters more than following the rules. There are times when saving lives matters more than political convenience. The response from Earth's population was immediate and overwhelming. Protests erupted in support of the war effort. Civilians volunteered for evacuation duties. Factories worked overtime to produce supplies for the refugee camps. Humanity might be facing economic disaster, but they were united in their determination to help the Zilani. Meanwhile, Dr. Lisa Park worked frantically in her makeshift laboratory aboard the refugee ship Haven. The quantum virus had been partially successful, but the swarm was evolving too quickly. She needed a new approach, something that would strike at the heart of their collective intelligence. The problem is their adaptation rate, she explained to her research team. Every time we disrupt their network, they rebuild it stronger than before. It's like trying to fight an enemy that learns from every punch. Her assistant, Dr. Kevin Ross, pulled up the latest data from the battlefield. What if we're approaching this wrong? Instead of trying to disrupt their network, what if we could overload it? Lisa stared at the equations on her screen. The idea was brilliant and terrifying. You're talking about a feedback loop? Force their collective mind to process so much information that it burns itself out. Exactly. But it would require a massive coordinated strike. Every human ship in the fleet would need to hit them simultaneously with the same quantum frequency. The plan was dangerous and had never been attempted before. But with the swarm growing stronger every day and the galaxy united against them, humanity was running out of options. As the Council continued to debate sanctions and punishment, the real heroes of the galaxy fought on. Human soldiers died far from home defending people they had never met. Civilian volunteers risked everything to transport refugees to safety. Scientists worked around the clock to find solutions to impossible problems. The galaxy had turned its back on genocide, but humanity had answered with courage and sacrifice. They might face economic ruin and political isolation, but they had saved millions of lives. And in the end, that was what mattered most. The price of defiance was high, but humanity was willing to pay it. They had learned long ago that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. And they would not abandon that lesson now, no matter what the cost. The emergency alarm echoed through the Altarian trade. Federation's capital ship as panicked reports flooded in from their outer colonies. Chancellor Morthick, the energy being who had refused to help the Zilani just weeks before, watched in horror as his own worlds burned on the tactical displays. How is this possible? He demanded from his crystalline containment shell. The swarm was supposed to be contained in Zilani space. Our military advisors assured us it would not spread. His aide, a younger Altarian named Velinara, trembled as she delivered the devastating news. Sir, the colony of Altair 7 has gone dark. We lost contact with Altair 9 3 hours ago. The swarm is moving through our territory at incredible speed. The screen showed the same horrible sight that had once plagued the Sara Prime. Dark, writhing ships moved across Altarian worlds like a plague, consuming everything in their path. But these ships were different from the ones that had attacked. The Zilani. They were larger, more sophisticated, and terrifyingly more efficient. Commander Luke Phillips led a human reconnaissance squadron through the wreckage of what had once been Altair 7. Luke was a veteran scout pilot who had seen the aftermath of many battles, but this was unlike anything he had encountered before. The planet's surface had been stripped completely bare. Not just the cities and the people were gone, even the plant life, the soil, and the water had been consumed. "Command, this is Phillips," he reported through his ship's communication system. "The Altarian colony is completely gone. I'm not detecting any life signs whatsoever. It's like they vacuumed up the entire biosphere." Back aboard the Liberty. Bell, General Adams, studied the reconnaissance data with growing alarm. The swarm had not just survived their attacks, it had grown exponentially stronger. The quantum virus had slowed them down for a few weeks, but now they were adapting at a rate that defied all projections. "Sir, the new swarm units are showing technological advancement beyond anything we've seen," reported his science officer, Dr. Janet Miller. "They've incorporated Zilani defensive systems, human weapon designs, and now Altarian energy manipulation technology. Each species they consume makes them more dangerous." Luke's squadron continued their survey of the devastated Altarian worlds. What they found was even more disturbing than complete destruction. The swarm had left behind some structures, twisted monuments made from the bones and technology of their victims. They seemed to be taunting their enemies, showing them what awaited all organic life. "They're not just killing for resources anymore," Luke observed. "This is deliberate cruelty. They want us to see what they can do." The Altarian fleet, once proud and mighty, had lasted less than 4 days against the enhanced swarm. Their energy-based weapons, which had been effective against conventional enemies, were absorbed and redirected by the swarm's new biomechanical hulls. Their escape pods were hunted down systematically, leaving no survivors to tell their story. Captain Sophie Turner received the distress call from the Hesperus system, while her battle group was resupplying at a human depot. Sophie was known throughout the fleet for her tactical brilliance and her ability to win battles against impossible odds. Now she faced her greatest challenge yet. "Ma'am, we're receiving an emergency transmission from the Altarian refugee convoy," reported her communications officer. "They're requesting immediate assistance. The swarm has cut off their escape route." Sophie studied the tactical situation on her command screen. The Altarian convoy consisted of nearly 500 ships carrying over 10 million civilians. They were trapped between two swarm fleets in a star system with only one exit point. The human battle group had 12 ships against an enemy force that numbered in the thousands. "Battle stations," Sophie ordered. "All ships, prepare for combat. We're going to buy those refugees time to escape." Her crew knew it was a suicide mission, but they responded with the quiet professionalism that had become humanity's trademark. Lieutenant Brad Miller, her weapons officer, checked his targeting systems. Chief Engineer Grace Davis pushed the ship's engines beyond their safe limits. Every person on every ship prepared to give their lives for people who had once considered them inferior. The battle at Hesperus was brief but legendary. Sophie's tactical genius allowed her smaller force to strike at the swarm's coordination nodes, disrupting their formations long enough for the Altarian convoy to reach the jump point. Her ship, the Valiant, held the rear guard position as the last refugees escaped to safety. "This is Captain Turner to all Altarian vessels," she transmitted as her ship took devastating damage. "You are clear to jump. Tell the galaxy that humanity keeps its promises, even to those who abandon us." The Valiant's destruction lit up the Hesperus system like a new star. But the sacrifice was not in vain. Every single Altarian refugee ship escaped to safety. For the first time in galactic history, a species that had refused to help others found their own lives saved by those they had scorned. The recordings of the Hesperus battle spread throughout Altarian space faster than any official communication. Suddenly, the same beings who had voted against helping the Zilani were studying human combat tactics, trying to understand how such a young species could show such incredible courage. Dr. Lisa Park made her breakthrough while analyzing wreckage from a destroyed swarm ship aboard the refugee vessel Haven, working with exhausted Zilani scientists and newly arrived Altarian researchers. She finally understood the fatal flaw in the swarm's rapid evolution. "They're adapting too fast," she explained to the mixed group of alien scientists. "Every time they absorb new technology or biology, they create quantum instabilities in their collective consciousness. The more they adapt, the more unstable they become." Dr. Thalmanos, the Zelani scientist who had lost his entire world, leaned forward with interest. "You're saying their greatest strength is also their weakness?" "Exactly. We've been trying to disrupt their network from the outside. But if we can force them to adapt multiple contradictory technologies simultaneously, their collective mind should tear itself apart." The solution required a weapon unlike anything ever built. It would need to deliver multiple conflicting quantum signatures at exactly the same moment across a vast area of space. The technical challenges were enormous, and they would need the cooperation of multiple species to build it. That's when the impossible happened. Admiral Vexandra of the Arxian peacekeeping force arrived at the haven aboard her flagship, the Justice. The Arxians were known throughout the galaxy as the most moral species in civilized space. They had been the ones to refuse help to the Zelani, citing insufficient evidence of threat. Now their leader stood before the mixed group of refugees and human defenders. "We were wrong," Vexandra said simply. Her words carried the weight of a species known for never admitting error. "The Arxian people have watched the humans sacrifice everything to save others while we debated ethics and procedures. We have seen courage where we showed cowardice. We offer our fleet and our technology to help build your weapon." The arrival of the Arxian fleet changed everything. Other species, seeing the moral authority of the galaxy finally taking a stand, began to reconsider their positions. The hegemony remained hostile, but smaller civilizations started offering quiet support. Supplies began arriving from anonymous donors. Technical specifications appeared in unsecured databases where human scientists could find them, but time was running out. The enhanced swarm was moving toward the galactic core worlds, consuming everything in its path. Each victory made it stronger and more intelligent. Soon it would be powerful enough to threaten even the mighty hegemony, and by then, it might be unstoppable. Dr. Park worked around the clock with her multinational team to perfect the Cascade weapon. They had one chance to stop the swarm, and failure would mean the extinction of all organic life in the galaxy. The weapon would require a massive coordinated strike at the exact moment when the swarm was most vulnerable. The galaxy that had once turned away from genocide now faced its own extinction. And the only hope for survival lay in the hands of the species they had tried to punish for doing what was right. The nexus point was a place where gravity itself seemed broken. 3 dead stars created a gravitational anomaly that twisted space and time in ways that hurt to think about. It was here that the Void Swarm had gathered its greatest fleet, preparing for the final assault on the galactic core worlds. The sight was beyond terrifying. Millions of biomechanical ships arranged in perfect formations that stretched farther than the eye could see. Admiral Ben Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship, the New Washington, named after the ship captain. Rodriguez had sacrificed at the Sara Prime. Cole was old now, his hair completely gray and his face lined with the weight of command. Around him, the largest fleet in human history prepared for what everyone knew would be the final battle. "Sir, we have confirmation from all Allied vessels," reported his communications officer. "The Arxian fleet is in position. The surviving Zelani ships are ready. Even some Altarian vessels have joined us." Cole nodded grimly. It was strange to see former enemies fighting alongside humanity, but desperation had a way of changing old prejudices. The swarm had grown so powerful that it threatened every living thing in the galaxy. Species that had once scorned human courage now begged to follow human leadership. Captain Janet Pierce commanded the rebuilt Washington, its hull bearing the scars of countless battles, but its weapons upgraded with the new quantum cascade technology. Janet was a veteran of the Zelani evacuation, one of the few survivors from the original fleet. Her crew included people from a dozen different worlds, all united by their determination to stop the swarm. "All stations report ready, Captain." called out her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Mark Taylor. "The Cascade weapon is charged and synchronized with the Allied fleet." "Good," Janet replied. "Remember, we only get one shot at this. If the weapon fails, there won't be time for a second attempt." The plan was desperate but elegant. Dr. Park's quantum cascade weapon would create conflicting resonance frequencies across the entire swarm fleet simultaneously. The theory was that their collective consciousness would tear itself apart, trying to adapt to contradictory quantum signatures all at once. But it required perfect timing and coordination from hundreds of ships down in the engineering section. Chief Engineer Rebecca Taylor worked frantically to keep the cascade generators stable. Rebecca was the younger sister of the first officer, and both women had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in the fleet. The cascade technology was barely tested and had a tendency to overload at critical moments. "Ma'am, we're getting quantum fluctuations in Generator 3, reported her assistant, Petty Officer Sam Wilson. "It might not hold together during the synchronized discharge." "It'll hold," Rebecca said with more confidence than she felt. "It has to hold. Too many people are counting on us." The battle began with a charge that would be remembered for 1,000 years. The combined fleet of humans, Arxians, Zelani, and scattered Altarian survivors accelerated toward the swarm formation at maximum speed. The enemy responded immediately, their biomechanical ships moving like a living creature awakening from sleep. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Kelly led the Marine boarding teams that would attempt to plant additional cascade devices directly on swarm capital ships. Frank was a veteran of the ground fighting on the Sara Prime, one of the few Marines who had survived the entire war. His teams flew small, fast ships designed to penetrate enemy hulls and deliver their deadly cargo. "Remember, people," Frank transmitted to his Marines, "we're not trying to capture these ships. We're trying to plant bombs in their brains. Get in, plant the device, and get out. Don't try to be heroes." But heroism seemed to be humanity's natural response to impossible odds. The Marine assault teams flew through withering enemy fire, their small ships dancing between massive swarm vessels, like insects attacking giants. Many were destroyed in the first few minutes, but enough survived to reach their targets. The space battle was chaos beyond description. Ships died in moments as weapons that could melt planets were fired at point-blank range. The swarms adapted. Technology made them incredibly dangerous, but the Allied fleet fought with a coordination and determination that surprised even their own commanders. Captain Owen Baker flew the stealth ship Phoenix through the heart of the swarm formation, carrying the primary cascade device that would coordinate the entire attack. Owen was a test pilot who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in galactic history. His ship was barely large enough for one person and was loaded with experimental technology that might kill him even if the enemy didn't. "Phoenix 2. Fleet Command," Owen transmitted as his ship slipped between massive swarm vessels. "I'm approaching the target. The main hive ship is bigger than our intelligence suggested. It's like flying into the mouth of a mechanical god." The swarm's central command vessel was a nightmare made real. It was part ship, part living creature, and part something that defied description. Its surface writhed with organic components that pulsed with alien intelligence. This was the brain of the collective consciousness that had consumed billions of lives. Admiral Cole watched the tactical display as Owen's ship disappeared into the enemy formation. Around them, the battle raged with desperate intensity. Human ships were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced, but they had bought enough time for the cascade weapon to reach its target. "Sir, we're receiving the deployment signal from Phoenix," reported the communications officer. "Commander Baker has successfully penetrated the hive ship." Deep inside the swarm's central vessel, Owen worked quickly to plant the master cascade device. The corridors around him were alive in ways that made his skin crawl. The walls pulsed with a rhythm like a heartbeat, and he could swear he heard whispers in languages that had died with their speakers. "Phoenix to all ships," Owen transmitted. "Master devices in position. Beginning countdown sequence. All vessels prepare for synchronized cascade discharge." The countdown felt like an eternity. Throughout the Allied fleet, weapons officers watched their displays as the quantum cascade generators built up to critical levels. The success of the entire war depended on perfect timing across hundreds of ships separated by thousands of kilometers. 10 seconds to cascade, Owen reported. 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, fire! The quantum cascade erupted across the nexus point like a wave of pure energy. Every Allied ship fired simultaneously, creating overlapping fields of conflicting quantum resonance. The effect on the swarm was immediate and catastrophic. Their biomechanical ships began to convulse as their collective consciousness tried to process contradictory information from every direction at once. The swarm's greatest strength. Their ability to adapt and learn became their downfall. As they tried to adjust to dozens of different quantum signatures simultaneously, their collective mind tore itself apart. Ships that had been perfectly coordinated moments before began attacking each other. The hive consciousness that had connected, millions of individual units shattered like glass. Owen's ship, the Phoenix, was vaporized in the cascade, but his sacrifice lit the way to victory. Across the battlefield, swarm vessels simply stopped functioning as their controlling intelligence collapsed. Within minutes, the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known was reduced to lifeless debris floating in space. The Allied fleet found itself surrounded by the wreckage of an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. Admiral Cole stood in stunned silence. As reports came in from across the battle zone, the swarm was gone, completely and utterly destroyed. 6 months later, the Galactic Council chambers looked very different. Human delegates no longer sat in the observer section but occupied seats at the primary decision-making table. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive, newcomers now competed to offer trade agreements and military alliances. Ambassador Helen Carter, now promoted to Galactic Coordinator, addressed a council that had learned the hard way about the cost of abandoning moral principles. The hegemony had been dissolved after their cowardice became public knowledge. The Altarians had publicly apologized and offered massive reparations. Even the proud vegan empire had admitted their mistake. The galaxy faced a choice, Helen said to the assembled delegates. We could stand together against evil, or we could find excuses to look away. Some of us chose courage, others chose convenience. History will remember the difference. General Steve Adams oversaw the reconstruction of Zelani space, where human engineering teams worked alongside alien refugees to rebuild their civilization. The bond forged in battle had created an unbreakable alliance that would define galactic politics for generations to come. On Earth, a new memorial was dedicated to the thousands of humans who had died far from home defending strangers. The inscription was simple but powerful. When the galaxy turned away, humanity answered the call. We shall not forget their fire. Above the memorial flew flags from every species humanity had saved: Zelani, Altarian, and dozens of others whose worlds had been liberated from the swarm. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest voice could become the loudest roar when it spoke for justice. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the price of indifference. Humanity, once dismissed as primitive upstarts, had become the moral center of galactic civilization.